Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to a new edition of the Urban Sentinel live show, byproduct of the Urban Sentinel magazine. I'm Reggie Kearney. I'm your host for tonight, and we're just going to, I'm just going to jaw around for a little while, talking about some of today's current events. You know, we got a lot of stuff going on in this country right now and in the world, so it's always good to chop it up. Get an understanding from different individuals, their views and ideas on certain situations that might engulf us today. So my partner, one of my partners, Richard Cuff, hasn't come on yet. He's on his way in a few. So we get the producer Mark to hang out with me.
Yeah, I go with you for a little bit and everything like that until Richard gets in. We figure out what's going on. Like I said, I was talking to one of my co-workers, and they were in your neck of the woods because they had gone to a Kojic convention up there in Baltimore. They said they had a good old time. Said they had people that were talking about youth ministry and music ministries and different aspects of the Kojic ministry. And like you were telling me, that particular conference bounces around like a lot of conferences do, city to city, and they're not always in the same place. Because I know, like the Poetry Slam, they just were in a different city. I think they were down, I can't remember where they were in Florida, where they were this year. They bounce around. But yeah, some of these conferences, whether they're art conferences or whether they're religious conferences, they bounce around. And then you got things like National Black that's always been in Winston since it started. And EFF used to bounce around. That's the American Black Film Festival, but it's been in Miami pretty much for the last decade or so and everything like that. But yeah, they used to bounce around too. I think NABJ bounces around, and I'm not sure where NABJ.
But they're down in Atlanta right now. They're down in Atlanta this week.
Okay.
Yeah, they're down in Atlanta this week, and I tell you, that's one organization that's really needed today, especially with so much news, the news cycle as it is today. But I was thinking the other day, we lost so many of our great Black magazines and newspapers, and it's a shame, that
the show before you were just talking about one of those great papers, because St. C Academy is every Tuesday. They're at 6 o'clock, and Mama Tony, who runs that, she runs a charter school, the St. C Academy, and all along those lines. But she was remembering, because you were showing and having a discussion about Pan-Africanism, and she was remembering the magazine Crisis. And I know you remember Crisis and everything like that, and I don't know if NAACP still publishes Crisis, but Crisis was one of those magazines. And I remember when we tried to have a Black national paper. I forgot the name of it, but I think it was based in D.C., and I don't think it had much.
Yeah, you're talking about the Informer, but the Informer is still around.
Okay.
The Afro-American newspaper in Baltimore is still around. So you, in some instances, you still got some, stuff going on. The Informer has really, I wouldn't say it has struggled, but it's a free newspaper. They operate on advertising dollars, and their sphere of influence is really the DC market, just DC really itself, the city. You can get copies of it in the different supermarkets outside of DC, but they're online. They have online presence, and they really are focused on the DC area. Where same thing with Afro American. They have a Baltimore version. They have a DC version. They used to deliver down to where I live at, but they stopped doing that. They had a guy who was bringing it into the convenience stores and the supermarkets in this area. But those are still two strong newspapers. Then, in Raleigh, you still got the Carolinian.
The Carolina Times is gone. The Carolina Times is gone, but it has some other papers that are filling that void, like the Triangle Tribune and Spectacular Magazine, that's still around. And of course, you got the blogs like Black Ops, and there are other ones as well. So there are ways that the voids are being filled. Even though I do miss the Carolina Times because it is no longer an existing
Right.
publication. It closed after the fourth generation.
Yeah,
The
because
Republicans
I
started.
used to work for the Carolinian. When I was 14 years old, down in Franklinton, I had a newspaper route down in Franklinton, and I used to carry used to deliver the Carolinian. I had
But the
probably about
Carolinian,
50 or 60 customers. And then when I was selling back in the 70s, I think the cost of it was probably like 25 cents, something like that.
25 cents
And
or 50 cents.
I got a dime. And I gave them 15 cents.
That was my second job out of school because the first job was the Garner News in Garner, North Carolina. Then I worked for 2 years with the Carolinian. And the Carolinian is still around.
Oh
Mr.
yeah.
Gervais is still carrying that paper, but it's the Carolina Times that has disappeared, which was the Durham black newspaper and everything like that. But the Carolinian is still around, and I think it's the grandson, and I think Paul Gervais Jr. or something like that. He's still involved and everything like that. And there's still some of those journalists around. Cash Michaels is still doing some stuff in the radio, but also doing filmmaking, and I think he might still be doing some reporting. And then you got people like Carl Kenny that does his blog, and Mark Anthony Neal is a Duke professor that does a blog. So there's some of this is being carried by blog publications as well. There's a lady that does a whole blog around grammar and everything like that. So yeah, I'm trying to think of her name, but she goes by Beverly Mahone, I think it's but she goes by Mama Bev or something like that. But she talks about some of these words that we use that we know the meanings of, and some of them we don't know the meanings of. So she gives like definitions and does a number of other cool things in her blog that you can find. I think it's on her Instagram and on some of the other sources. She might even have a TikTok and everything like that. So there's modern versions that even some of these people, because I think Beverly might be in her, I think she's older than me, so she might be pushing near late 60s or early 70s and everything like that. So, yeah, we got some folks that are doing some interesting form of journalism. I remember, and I don't know if it's still around, is the Amsterdam News still around? Because that was a major publication out of New York that was part of our community as well, but I don't know if they are still active or not, or the Chicago Defender for that matter.
It's still a lot. The majority of the black newspapers are still around. They still got a paper presence and they got a online presence, but not as strong as it used to be. Mainly because, like you said, there are so many different blogs out here. I mean, you look on the national level. You got Joy Reid and Don Lemon and a lot of those guys. Now, they're not attached to any mainstream news agency. So what they do, they develop blogs and everything to get their viewpoint out. So I think what's happening too is a lot of people are gravitating towards the blogs. Okay, I think one of the other things that has happened, revenue is down because the Fortune 500 companies, it's hard to get them to advertise in black media. Okay, it's just like they don't want to do it. I mean, I think Roland Martin, he survives off of us. People who give him $5, $10 here, to keep him going. He just has built such a mass following that's easy for him to do that, and to, people give him money to keep him going. But, the whole landscape technology, of media has changed for the black community. And then something else that happens too is that our youth are not engaged into news, okay? Current events, they hear it, they digest it, goes out the other ear, but they're not into it like, say, we are, where we'll sit and go through a whole 2 or 3 blogs for a minute or online presence just to get a feel of what's going on here in this country now.
That's true, but I have seen some young people, like my new program manager at HI. He's in his late 20s, and he does seem to be engaged in looking at some of the news items and stuff like that because he's into the arts and all along those lines. So he might be doing stuff that is in his interest range and everything like that. But I'm sometimes fascinated when I talk to the young people about things that they tell me about, because in talking to the other intern, not Curtis. Curtis is the white intern that is working with me in terms of doing some history documentation and seeing some of the things we've got at HI that we didn't even know we had, like old paintings and old books and CDs and stuff like that. And I think her concentration is on the newsletter, and she wants to be a filmmaker. So she's looking at some filmmaking stuff. She's actually thinking about doing a film around Azusa Street projects and that
Mm-hmm.
whole thing that created kind of the Pentecostal movement and Reverend
Mm-hmm.
Seymour Johnson. There's been a couple of films. Matter of fact, I think there was one that was released last year, but I think she might be trying to take it from a different perspective because you can, find a story and it might have different arcs. So depending on the arcs, just because one's been made doesn't mean you can't make one that can be equally as successful or maybe even more successful. But she was telling me
Mm-hmm.
about this book that she was a fan of, and it was something like it had Win Dixie in the title or something along those lines. But she was telling me about how it had really captured her attention because it was about this lost dog and everything like that. But she was telling me
Mm-hmm.
about this fantasy book, and like I said, I know it's got Win Dixie in the title, and I remember the old Win Dixie grocery store because when she mentioned Win Dixie, I was going like, I remember Win Dixie. I also remember Piggly Wiggly, and a lot of people don't
Mm-hmm.
remember those restaurants, but they used to exist, both Win Dixie and Piggly Wiggly and everything like that. So I don't know what would some of the grocery stores that you went to and everything like that, as I'm trying to find right.
Well, I mean, Winn Dixie was one. Piggly Wiggly was one in my hometown. That's what we had was a Piggly Wiggly. And they still, you go into South Carolina, you can still in Georgia, you can still find some Piggly Wigglies, and you go down to southern Georgia and Florida, and you can still find some Winn Dixies and stuff.
Right.
They
And the book
still
was
just.
called Because of Winn Dixie. So I guess Winn Dixie might have been the name of the dog. She was also telling me about another fantasy book called Fourth Wing. And then she was telling me about a singer named Mama Yosef and everything. So sometimes it's interesting talking to these young folks because they tell you about things. And you're sitting going like, I try to be on top of the culture, but I have no idea what you're talking about. When she was telling me about this book and everything like that. And I'm actually looking it up right now and everything. But yeah, it's written by Kate Camello and everything, and it's a children's novel, and all along those lines. And it's apparently very popular. It's about a 10-year-old India Opel Bolana who moves to a new town in Florida with her preacher father and adopts a stray dog she names Winn Dixie after the supermarket where she finds him. So the
Mhm.
scruffy, funny dog helps Opal make new friends, learn about her absent mother, and discover the power of friendship, forgiveness, and community in a heartwarming story about overcoming loneliness. So it definitely looks like she's moved. She's living with her dad. So it seems like it's got a lot of family dynamics as well. And it's among the cast of quirky characters, they say, include the librarian, Miss Franny Block, Gloria Dump, and Otis, and everything like that. So it sounds like we hear about the absent fathers, but there are absent mothers as well. So it sounds like this is what that story is based on, and all along those lines. So, and there's even say that the book is controversial. They say faces controversies in some schools and libraries due to its inclusion of mature themes. So
Mhm.
critics object to the book's reference to alcoholism, malprofanity, divorce, and a character who spent time in jail, arguing those topics are unsuitable for young readers. It seems to me like that's stuff that young people deal with all day long. So why would those be topics that are not kind of like good for folks to learn about? Because apparently the story features characters struggling with alcohol abuse. One character, Gloria Dump, has beer and whiskey bottles hanging from a tree to represent the ghosts of her parents, of her past, which some parents feel is inappropriate for young children. And then the book also has apparently profanity and name calling, and of course some heavy family issues with the mother leaving the family due to alcoholism. And one character is a gentle pet store worker who the children befriend, who is also known to have a criminal record and has been to jail. So I don't know why these are things that folks shouldn't be talking about, even in young books and everything like that. So sometimes people just need to shield on some of the criticisms because like
But I think some of it is you got a lot of parents out here that are still very protective of their kids, even though when the parents ain't around, here's some of these things these kids be talking about. I mean, working in the school system, especially most of the time I spent in middle school, these kids, gun them out, they tell you some stuff you don't even know nothing about.
yeah,
And everything, so their minds are wide open because of their friends and stuff. So they learn a lot of stuff from their friends. So yeah, they could read it in the book, and probably have an understanding of it. But you got so many protective parents that a lot of books that come out, they don't want the kids to read it. I mean, when you start, looking at Maya Angelou, and you started canceling books. I mean, come on now. I mean, their poems. I haven't seen a poem that she's written that goes into the wrong direction as far as morality and stuff like that. She's just telling it like it is.
She just telling it like it is. And apparently, this other book that the other intern was telling me about is called Fourth Wing, and apparently it had its success. Its success. We were talking about the blogs and everything because apparently it became the number one New York Times bestseller, largely due to its viral success on TikTok's book talk community. So apparently,
Mhm.
TikTok has a whole book talk community, and it has some interesting. And it's definitely because it's labeled as a new adult fantasy romance, and the lady that told me about is a college graduate, so she's definitely a young adult. But apparently, its themes include survival, enemies to lovers, romance, political conflict, and found family. And it's the first book in the Empyrean series, followed by Iron Flame. But it's got some interesting things because apparently, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros is a best-selling fantasy romance novel about Valid Sarengal, who is forced by her mother to join the brutal Basquiat's War College to become a dragon rider, despite being physically fragile and destined for a quieter life as a scribe. So the book apparently follows her journeys as she navigates daily training, political intrigue, and a brewing rebellion, all while facing enemies and a potential romance with the ruthless wing leader, Zayden Ryerson. So it looks like there's a lot of these themes are definitely adult themes, and they even identify themselves as a adult romance fantasy. And apparently, they say it's a spicy book, and some people are even saying that it could possibly be in the LGBT community because yes, Fourth Wings by Rebecca Yarros features LGBTQ plus representation, but it's not the main focus. The series is primarily a heterosexual romantasy, which is romance fantasy centered on the main character. But apparently, they add some characters that might be some side characters that might have these alternative lifestyles and might even have some characters that are non-binary. So, you dealing with hobbits and things like that. There's no telling what a hobbit might be. I've never met a hobbit. I don't know if you've ever met a hobbit, but I've never met a hobbit. So I don't know what they'd be trying to do and everything. I actually was just watching an old episode of Criminal Mind, and the episode actually featured a person that was going on a killing spree, but he was going on a killing spree because his wife had gotten pregnant, and apparently he had had surgery, so that was dealing with the prostate. So he couldn't be the one that got her pregnant, and they were part of the swinger lifestyle. So apparently he was a little upset that his wife had gotten pregnant by somebody other than
Mhm.
himself. So he went on this whole killing spree, which was the story arc, and at the end one of the agents took him out and everything like that. But yeah, apparently he was a little upset after he had found out that his wife had gotten pregnant by somebody else. But in the story arc, I'm going like, wait a minute, you were part of a swinging society. It seems to me that you might know that might be a risk in a swinging society, depending on what goes on and who's inviting you and what the precautions are. Because I've been on, I don't know if you read it, but I've been shocked. I've actually been on some of the mailing lists. Like I think there's a group called Carolina Friends or something like that. But there's actually an active swinging community. I don't know about in Durham. I think there might be one in Durham, but there's a very active one down there in Charlotte. And I'm going like, yeah, they got like their own mansion and stuff. And I'm going like, I
Mhm.
don't know that I would want to go down there and partake in that because there's no telling what you might run across or who you might
You
run
ain't
across.
lying.
Or what your motive be.
This day and time, you gotta be careful being out there acting crazy.
Right.
You really gotta be something. But people into different lifestyles, and they want to do what they want to do and everything. So it
People want to
is
do what
what
they
it
want to
is.
do.
What it is.
It is
But
what it is. Speaking of doing what you want to do, I gotta ask you this because we've been talking about it on the network and everything like that. And I did not realize the whole story arc, but apparently he was not the nicest man to the black community. I mean, he kind of might have had his own strong sermon moments and all along those lines. But why would you have a disease or an ailment that, my understanding is, it is known as a widowmaker? That's the nickname that is given anyway. But you're so concerned about going on face the nation that you're not even going to deal with your health issues, which is part of the reason that Lindsey Graham is no longer with us and everything.
well, from what I can hear, about that, when you have a tear in your aorta,
Right,
you don't necessarily know it's coming. Okay,
right.
it's something that's worked up over the years. Okay, I mean, I'll give you a prime example. I do have one stent. Okay,
Hmm.
reason I got that stent was for about a year I was feeling like crap. Okay, I was telling the cardiologist, and he was saying, "Oh, you be all right. You know, they'll run tests and everything, and couldn't find out." But a lot of times, tests don't mean a thing.
Right.
And I was getting to the point where it was hard for me to walk to my car. You know, I get out of breath at home, walking up the steps and everything. So, one day I just, I've been telling him for about a year. And my one visit in November, end of November, of December, beginning of December, I said, "Look, man, I know what my body is telling me. I'm sick. I can't hardly breathe. I can't do this. I get winded quickly. Something is wrong." Finally, he relented. This was in 2024. And the first thing he said, "Okay, meet me at the hospital on December 28th, 7 o'clock in the morning." He said, "We're going to do three things. We're going to run a camera up in there and see if any of your arteries are closed. If they are closed, we'll see if we can just give you a stent." He said, "If it's beyond doing a stent, we'll give you open bypass surgery." Okay, I was cool with that because that day, Christmas Day, when I was with family, I couldn't eat, I couldn't do nothing. Okay, went in there, found out that I had one artery that was 75% blocked.
Well,
That's when they put a stent in, and the others were around 30 to 50%. He said, "We won't worry about those right now because medicine will probably have that." So a lot of times when you're feeling bad and you're feeling bad and you feel like you're about to die, you have to be an advocate for yourselves.
yeah, definitely.
Because that's why they call the medical field the practice of medicine. Okay, the practice. Okay, remember that, the practice. Okay, they practice it on you because they really don't know what's going on with you. They're gonna run 200 tests to find out what's going on with your body. And if I hadn't really pushed them and pushed them and pushed them and told them, said, "Look, man, I feel like I'm going to die." I said, "I really feel bad. If I hadn't pushed them, I would be dead now."
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, we all know our birth date, and we've got to deal with that dash in between because none of us know our end date
Yeah.
and all along those lines. Because that is a well-known fact and everything. But yeah, I did hear that Lindsey Graham decided it was more important for him to go in front of the face of the nation and talk
Yeah.
about some of the political things that he was
And
dealing with.
I guarantee he was operating on pain, on chest pains, and probably thinking it was gas.
Yeah,
Because I had a cousin, well, my wife had a cousin who passed away some years ago, and he always thought all he was doing was having heartburn.
mm,
That's all he thought. He didn't think nothing else. But he got him one day, caught him at a
wow,
massive heart attack because he thought he had heartburn.
right.
He would always talk about how he was feeling, how his chest was hurting and painful. But he said, "Oh, it's just heartburn, something I ate."
Mm. Everything is heartburn and everything like that. How's it going, Richard? I see you done joined us. I know you out there in the fast lanes of the box
Jacksonville.
stores and everything like that. Because I've got friends that have gone to Sam's and Costco's, and sometimes that's that fast lane where you got to go there and get those discount deals and everything like that. Because I don't have a Sam's card or a Costco card, but I do have friends of mine that have both of those, and a lot of them they live by them because that's how they get them serious deals, even away from Amazon and everything like that. So, how you doing? I guess you went down there and bought off all the Sam's.
That's me. I'm twice a month, end of the month or middle of the month, I make my Sam's Club run. And and what's interesting is the app knows my shopping, so it'll remind me you didn't get this or you didn't get that. And one of the things that's on my list is fresh fruit. I love their fruit. So at this time it's the cherries were nice. So I got those. So y'all may see me munching every now and then. These cherries are good.
Those Sam's cherries are good. You got to get those cherries from Sam's and everything like that.
Well, it's nothing wrong when you munching. At least you munching on something healthy and everything. So
that's that. You know what? No, I was gonna say I'm listening to you guys talk, and one of the we've got to shift our mindset, and I'm not talking about race wise, just human wise, right? If you look at health as a utility, as opposed to a luxury. What you'll do is like you treat health like an old car, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say when you got a brand new car, you polishing that joker and you wiping it and you keeping it clean. You at the car wash every weekend. But as it gets older and older, you start ignoring stuff. You start ignoring that scratch. You got a dent. It's gonna cost you $900 to fix that dent. And then before long, the car doesn't look anywhere near the way it looked when you first got it because it's a utility. And you figure it gets me from point A to point B. You've heard people say that. Look, I ain't got the best car, but it get me from point A to point B. When people start treating their health like it just gets me from point A to point B, you start ignoring those check engine lights, like you do was saying his heart was hurt. That's a check engine light, but you ignore it. It's smelling like smoke and oil is burning. You forget that. I mean, your body is sending you all kinds of signals to go and get this thing checked out by, at least go do a diagnostic exam, but they don't. So I treat health like it's a luxury item, right? And it is a luxury for me to have good health. So I'm at the doctor twice a year, just on general purpose. I go and see my primary physician twice a year, and I get annual physicals. I'm scheduled for a colonoscopy tomorrow morning. Not tomorrow morning. What is it? Monday morning. But but it's every 5 years. I haven't missed one since I was 45 years old, and I'm not going to miss them because health for me is a luxury item, and I'm treating it like this is the greatest thing that I got. In fact, every morning I recite 7 things in my mind. I just go through them so that I can be consciously aware of them all day long. And I'll say health, wealth, success, prosperity, good fortune, and peace of mind.
Oh, yeah.
And those 6 things to me equals joy unspeakable. What brings me joy unspeakable? Those 6 things. And when I can go down the list and have them, today I wake up, I got health, I've got wealth, I've got success, I've got prosperity, I've got good fortune, and I've got peace of mind. I've got joy unspeakable, and I walk around all day with that. So yeah, I'm grateful for my health.
I do want to tease you about one thing, Richard, though, and Reggie can identify with this as well. I get around by mass transit. It's been a long time since I even had a vehicle and everything like that. But I do have to laugh that every time, and it seems almost like it's one of them unwritten rules that people decide to go to the car wash is when the great thunderstorms decide to come and everything like that. So like there's an unwritten rule that as soon as you decide to wash your car, that the work that you did, because I've seen people just spend all kinds of details, get in the car, all detailed, shining it up, making it look brand new. It looks like it just came off the car lot. And then next thing you know, that big thunderstorm rolls and just destroys the whole job and everything like that. So it is like one of them little kind of like ironies that happens on a regular basis. Because folks
one thing is, why I have insurance, I'm gonna keep my car fixed. Okay.
Right.
When I feel bad, if I sneeze wrong, I'm going to the doctor. I'm just like that. And people should be like that. If you got insurance, use it. That's what it's for.
Well,
That's definitely
let me tell you, I had back in November, I had a severe dizzy spell. It was kind of weird. I never felt anything like it before. The next morning, I called my doctor, and they said, go to the ER.
Right.
I'm 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm checking into the ER. I didn't get out that evening, I think until 8:30, 9 o'clock that evening. All day long, they ran every test you could run. EKG, CAT scan, MRI. Why? Because I got the insurance to cover it. But also, I want to make certain that if anything is going wrong, I know about it. And fortunately, they didn't find anything. But one of the things about not only, in fact, it's raining right here, right now. Not only do the thunderstorms come right after you detail the car, but try to go to the mechanic and get the car to make that sound. It ain't gonna do it. Like every time I try to crank it up, it goes ka-tunk, 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 ka-tunk. And then you get there to the mechanic and it cranks up perfectly. That's the frustrating part.
Oh yeah, that can be very frustrating. Everything like that.
You know, so look, he like I said, he probably been walking around for weeks, you know, feeling bad. And they said, you know, when you had that type of issue, that traveling, long distance traveling can, you know, aggravate it, okay? You know, but it's sad for anyone, I don't care who you are, and if you have the ways and means to take care of yourself, that you die because you haven't taken care of yourself. You know, that's just crazy. And so I refuse to allow myself to die because I didn't take care of myself. Like I said, if my little toe hurt, I'm going to the doctor to find out why my little toe is hurting. You know, simple as that. You know, that's how I view it. You know, look at it. You know.
Hey, by the way,
I think
just getting on. I know y'all got some in Florida and in Baltimore, but there's a very popular restaurant here in Durham that's got a lot of history. And the last year, the Chicken Hut was recognized as a local historic landmark by the Durham City Council. I think even one of our preservation societies recognized it as well. So Trey Tapp is the second generation owner of the Chicken Hut, and definitely even John T. Edge was searching for homes after trying to find it in Southern food. So definitely looks like he was told growing up that John Edge was that growing up as a white boy in Georgia that he needed to find some of these great places and everything like that. So definitely, apparently, pimento cheese has some ties to North Carolina as well, which I did not know that pimento cheese had these North Carolina ties and everything like that, because apparently it's known as Carolina caviar, and it's just synonymous with Southern food culture as sweet tea and fried chicken. I just had some sweet tea earlier, and some people say that I'm overly addicted to sweet tea and everything like that. So I did not realize that this pimento cheese also had some North Carolina connections as well. So you learn some things from looking at UNW and the NPR stations.
I don't want no pimento cheese because I had enough of it when I was growing up. Okay, you know, Chick-fil-A, you know, they come up with a new sandwich every quarter, every season, and they got a pimento cheese with Chick-fil-A sandwich now. You know, I was asking for another sandwich they had, and they didn't have it. And she told me what she had. I said, no, I don't want that because I done had enough pimento cheese. Last me a lifetime, being from North Carolina.
I know that's right. You get plenty in North Carolina. You know, last week we were talking about it, and I've been following the case a little bit. We'll look into a serious topic. What's going on with this disappearing case, and what was happening with the gentleman down there in the coast and his three friends? Because I know we left that topic last week, and we never.
So, first of all, they took the phone and the keys. They would not have said that they had his phone because they didn't know that the mother had a tracker on it. Mm-hmm. So the mother tracked the phone back to one of the friends. That's how they had the phone and his keys. First off, now they're discovering that he actually did leave the island on July 4th and was at a pool party. There's a photo of him at a pool party on the 5th. So he came up missing. They said he was left behind on the 4th of July, but actually he came over and they probably killed him and took him back, claiming that they got a photo. There's a photo of him at a pool party on the 5th of July. So he came off the island on the 4th. There's a video of him arguing with one of the boys about his phone, and he's saying, "Give me back my damn phone." And that video is out there. And now the image of him at the pool party on July 5th. So how could he have been left behind on the 4th, but he's at the pool party on July 5th, argument over his phone on July 5th, and then he comes up dead and they claim that he was left behind on the island. Chances are they all watched him drown, and I guarantee you the autopsy is going to find chlorinated water in his lungs. And when that autopsy finds chlorinated water in his lungs, it's going to be proven that they drowned him in that swimming pool and took him back to the island to claim that he drowned there. So that's my story, but we're going to see, because I guarantee you they're going to find chlorine in his body.
But you know something, His best friend said that was him arguing about the phone. I don't know. I just think we're at a dead end, and if there is some negligence among the kids that's never going to come out because the parents have coached the kids, and those kids they're going to stick together. I saw the same photo you saw today too with him. Showing that he was at a party. You get to a point where you're trying to say, who do you believe? The sheriff. The sheriff is running around, in a circle. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's getting, he just can't figure it out either. So I don't know what's going to happen in this, because somebody out there knows what happened. They truly
Well,
know what happened, and they won't come
we
forth
used to
come forth.
exactly prior to Trump, we could say, well, the federal government is going to come in and investigate. And usually back in the day, man, if something raised up to the level of the federal government needing to get involved, you knew it was the FBI, their forensic lab, the Department of Justice, the whatever, all these different federal organizations, they were going to get it done. We don't have that confidence anymore. If it goes up to the federal level, it's over, because it's a freaking clown show on the federal level now. And I said this over and over again. I can't remember the guy's name who said the quote, but they said when a clown moves into the palace, the clown does not become a king. The palace becomes a circus.
Yeah.
And that's where we are right now. The palace has become a circus because of that clown that's up there. And so we don't have a hope if they somehow cover up this murder on the local level. It's going to go up to the state and to the federal government. There's no justice above the state government, because they're manipulating the voting rights and everything else.
Well, speaking of the clown show and everything like that, apparently the clown in charge is still saying that vandals have been messing with his reflecting pool. So that came out, I think, yesterday or today, that he's still claiming that they are messing with his reflecting pool and all along those lines. So he's swearing up and down that people are over there tampering with his reflecting pool, which he didn't need to be tampering with in the first place himself, and all along those lines. And, I'm convinced, because the world is really mad at the U.S. So I'm convinced that Donald Trump, that clown that we're talking about, can also be blamed for the reason that the U.S. was not in the Final Four and won't be in the championship match, because Spain beat France earlier today, and we'll see what Argentina does with England tomorrow and everything like that in the World Cup. But as soon as he got himself involved in the World Cup, I knew the U.S. was doomed for a loss and everything, because he was trying to rig the games and everything like that. So he tried to rig the games by making a call, and it was a bad call. I mean, they didn't need to make that call in the first place, but he also didn't need to be getting involved.
No, I think they should have let it play out the way that it was. He wouldn't miss this game, I believe, had they not gotten distracted with Trump's involvement. They would have been able to concentrate on a win. Not only did they lose, they lost 4-1. You don't lose 4-1 in a soccer game.
No.
Unless you're real bad, unless you're a terrible team.
And they were not
that's 4-1. That's the score of like kiddie soccer. The best. I mean, some of these games go forever and nobody scores. You won maybe 2, but 4, and your best man is on the field at the time. Nah, I think they just weren't. Their hearts weren't in the game now that Trump is in it. But you remember Trump did the same thing to the New York Knicks when he showed up. During the playoffs.
That game, because he showed up. I mean, they went ahead and won the series, but yeah, he messed them up.
But the thing is, I agree with you, Richard. If they had left it alone and let that guy set out, that would have forced the U.S. to play harder.
Right.
Without that main score, and they probably would have won, and then he could have come back into the next game, and they probably would be in a position then to be in this, been in the semifinals today.
Right.
But I think that played on. But tomorrow night, not tomorrow night, but Thursday night, he's going to tell us what he found in his investigation of the 2020, how many years ago? That's been 6 years ago election, you know.
Oh,
Why
he did his own private investigation?
yeah, what is the man, why is he so fixated with the 2020 election? You know, so he gonna throw the sacrificial lambs tomorrow night are gonna be Warlaw and the other senator from Georgia. You know, he's gonna swear
Well,
up and
he talks
down.
about the Trump derangement syndrome. I think he's got Obama derangement syndrome.
Yeah, you know, but he's gonna use the
Yeah,
two senators from Georgia to show that American that they got elected illegally. Okay, come on now.
yeah, he's
He
lost.
can't win
But
for
you know what? Speaking of Warnock, shout out to Warnock who really pushed this legislation through, where the major these hedge funds that bought these houses for investments, they
Mm-hmm.
wrote the legislation that they cannot buy houses anymore. And my understanding is that the houses that they own, they got to sell them in 7 years. They can't hold on to them for 30 years like they were planning. So, like in Atlanta, the private equity firms own 72,000 homes in Atlanta. 72,000 homes are owned by 2 or 3 investment firms. 72,000.
Wow.
So that means in 7 years, those 72,000 houses are going to be released like a fire sale, and they're going to take what they can get for them. And this is like what this is like the biggest wealth switch. Like what the Bible says, what the enemy intended for evil, God intended it for good.
Mm-hmm.
If those houses had been owned by individual white folk, it would be difficult for black people to buy those houses. But now that they got all of those houses together, they got to release them all at once. So what do we need to be doing? We need to be making certain that we are helping people get their credit straight, get their credit straight, get their finances in order. It's not going to take much of a down payment because these companies are going to take what you offer because they got a bad portfolio, because if they can't sell them, they're going to lose their original investment. So that legislation passed without Trump signing it. But get this, Trump could have vetoed it, but he didn't, because he ain't crazy.
Yeah, but look, don't you think? Okay, hedge funds, real estate partnerships, and things of that nature. Don't you think we're killing ourselves? You know, need to be some adjustment in hedge funds and investment groups. But don't you think to a certain extent we're killing ourselves by just saying, look, you all got to dump these houses, because a lot of this stuff was just investments, and then at the end of the year, they were losing the losses on the IRS to get back some refunds and stuff. But that's been a vehicle to drive the economy and drive people to be rich. Okay, you know, should we?
It's right. It's different when 72,000 homes help 3 hedge funds become richer. And okay, so there's a couple thousand investors in those hedge funds, but they're not in those 72,000 houses.
Right.
Wealth, and since 1865, when somewhere in the 1860s, Lincoln signed the Homestead Act, which granted all that land that we bought from Louisiana. I mean, from the French during the Louisiana Purchase. Lincoln gave all that land away. Basically, he said, if you can go out there and live on it for 5 years, it's yours. And that's what gave white America the majority of their wealth, when they got all of that land. And then that wealth passed down from generation to generation, where individual white folk were able to compartmentalize their wealth into the house that they handed down to their children. Those 72,000 houses should be 72,000 black folk that own those houses. So that's why I'm not for a hedge fund owning that number of houses, because when that wealth passes down, it doesn't pass down to those 72,000 families and their grandchildren.
Okay. So I want to go out and buy 10,000 homes in 7 years. What's wrong with that?
You can't because it's illegal now. Because that's 10,000 families that don't have a home. The problem is when one person, one person is running up the lot.
But okay, Rich, this is the thing. Unless we start preparing our community now, I'm talking about tomorrow, to be prepared for this windfall, then our community will not be ready to take those homes off the market. Okay?
No, but it's not this. No, it's not. But see, what we've got to recognize, and it's the same mindset that W.E.B. Du Bois had about the talented 10th. There's 10% of us who are ready to go hit the ground running and do it right now. Just you got to say 90% of African Americans are financially illiterate. Just write them off. And that's really over exaggeration because the most people know how to manage their money. At the very least, don't spend what you don't have, that kind of thing. They know the very basics of financial management. But my point is this: you don't need every African American to be financially literate. What you need is for some Black-owned investment firms to get started that can buy up those homes. And if it's the three of us that do it, then we can do it because you don't need money to get these homes. You need leverage, you need education, you need connections. You need to, most of these homes you're going to be able to get just by signing the contract. That's how the purchase is going to be done. Because all these people want to do is get paid enough to cover their investment. So what we need to do is
we have a commenter on
what's that?
Liberty Twitcher just came in and said, except for people from India and the USA, probably every ethnic group is 90% not financially literate, especially the younger people. So he's making the argument that I guess that most of the people in society are not financially literate in all.
Yeah, I agree with him.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, because like I said, we're not prepared for this windfall. You're right. If we could get together as a group, yeah, we can, finagle it, buy many homes as we can, and then train, teach people how to buy these homes from us, be a little profit for us, but we can teach them how to have home ownership now. I don't know if the banks still do it and the nonprofits still do. I know at one time banks and nonprofits did offer first-time home buyer classes.
They still offer
business to prepare them to buy homes and to do that thing.
No, well, what needs to happen is the federal government, through the FHA and FDIC and all of the other, the federal government needs to get in the business of providing the same level of incentives to the homeowner that they provide to the billionaires and the trillionaires. They give them the same incentives to bring that down. Tell me, how is it that you can afford to pay $2,200 a month rent for a 3-bedroom house, but you can't pay $800 a month mortgage for it? The same house.
Yeah, but credit.
The mortgage, but then that's got nothing to do with education and the ability. That's credit. The credit line, screw credit. Well, if you're talking about how to get people into these 72,000 homes, they're already in the homes. What you're doing, or when I'm not saying you, but when you bring up credit and you bring up qualifications, you're trying to find ways to disqualify people, not to qualify them.
Not necessarily, because if the right organization comes along with the goal of making homeowners, then you take that inability to have good credit and you throw that out the window. You work with them to build better credit and to prepare them to buy homes, okay? Okay, look, let's just throw it out there.
Before you throw it out there, is your answer going to answer Liberty Christian's question? Because he's saying then those same incentives caused the 2008 financial crisis, loans made to people who couldn't afford them.
No, they did. Liberty, I'm going to answer that question. But the thing is, maybe we should take the credit score and throw the credit score out the window. and give them a grade or something else to help with that. But Twitch, Liberty Twitch, let me get back to you. Man, the 2008 situation in centers, that was about greed. Okay? That was pure greed. You know, for many of you all don't know, I'm in the DMV area. Okay? That's Washington, D.C., Virginia area. Okay? There were loan officers out there making big commissions off the selling homes to African Americans that came into office, had decent jobs, didn't have decent credit, but had decent jobs, and they were throwing these homes on them because they were letting them put little or nothing down. Okay, I remember the whole time. You didn't have to. You didn't have to have money. Okay, you just had to have a good job, maybe a couple $1,000s to go to closing. And that's when the thing blew up because it had started back at the beginning of 2000. Because I know when we went out to buy a new house in 2004, the loan broker tried to get us all into all these different kind of houses. We knew what we could pay and what we could afford, and we didn't want to jump into those things. Okay, before I could even get home one day, I had a loan package sitting on my front porch where he had tried to, because these guys, these loan companies were getting, whoever came in the door, they were trying to get. I didn't want that. I wanted the loan that we had originally talked about, okay? But people were set up to fail. We had so many houses in the community I live in that people were just leaving them, just taking the key back to the bank and dropping the key off, okay? Because of greed from loan brokers, okay? And these guys made some killings. I know one, I'm not going to call his name in there, just in case you're looking at it. I know one that made a killing. Man, people were going to him getting loan for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 houses like it was popcorn.
Hey, Richard, just really quickly along the same lines, and he would answer Liberty's question. But the other issue that I think people forget about is that it was not an accident the way that the projects were created, whether that was in Durham, whether that was in Baltimore, whether that was in New York, and all along those lines. Because part of that was part of the urban renewal and part of the highways that were going through these various communities as well, which destroyed a lot of our well centers, whether that was Durham, Black Wall Street, or a number of others as well. So I just wondered, because you are like me, in the history space. So if you could just share with Liberty Twitcher and anybody else that's listening, the impact of the projects in our community, because it was not an accident. These projects that were developed in Chicago, New York, and a number of other places.
No, let me tell you, it was a 3-part punch, right? And it was, first of all, it was in reaction to what happened in 1954. As you know, that's Thurgood Marshall argued the heck out of Brown v. Board of Education and won the case for desegregating not only the school systems, but once the school systems was desegregated, then that canceled out all segregations, right? So all segregations was canceled. And as a response, the federal government, through its institutions, set about retaliation. And the first thing they did was they started privatizing the school system immediately. And they started saying, we're going to take our children out of public school and put them in private school. But by the time, Richard Nixon became president, Nixon had no choice but to tell them white folk, look, if y'all want separate schools based on what the Civil Rights Act says, you can't get no tax dollars. And that was the white church that went on the warpath and they'd been on that warpath for 60 years. So that was the first strike. The second strike was when they decided to build the expressways. And did you know that the expressway system is actually I believe it is the nation's largest and most expensive monument to a president? The entire expressway system has an official name. It's like the Dwight D. Eisenhower Memorial International Highway System. That's what it's called. It is literally a monument to Dwight D. Eisenhower, I believe. I'm doing some more research on that. But when they designed the expressways, they could have made it go around every major city and avoid anything. But it plowed right through the middle of cities like Durham's Black Wall Street, And holy crap, I got lightning. Like if a lightning bolt decided to take me out, y'all, I'm like, y'all witnessing it. Good Lord. I mean, it was one of those cracks that you know how the lightning would strike, and then a couple seconds later you hear the pow. It was lightning and power at the same time, y'all. So here's the Miami had Overtown section.
Right.
40,000 black people lived in Overtown, and that was, they called it the Harlem of the South. They designed the expressway to go right through the middle of it, and that community went from 40,000 people. By the time it finished, it was only 8,000 that lived in that community. What did that do to the wealth? Jacksonville had an area here called La Villa. They also called it the Harlem of the South. And it was the Villa and Brooklyn. It was like a downtown and housing area. And they drove the expressway right through the middle. And you could probably go through 20 or 40 black cities and you see the expressway. That was strike number 2. And then strike number 3, after they used the expressways to separate everything, they built housing projects on top of houses. Cabrini Green is the perfect example of it. When you see Good Times come on, that's the Cabrini Greens. 18, 20 buildings in like a 4 or 5 city blocks of all black people in one area instead of spreading them out throughout the city. So yeah, that was a triple whammy. The attack of the church, the attack of the expressways, and the attack of the housing projects. And that's what we're dealing with today because we still have unfettered capitalism. And that's what I dropped out as you guys were talking about it. But the housing market was driven, and nobody talks about this, by the fact that Fannie Mae was buying these mortgages from the mortgage companies. And I was with a group, and we were about to start a black-owned mortgage company under the umbrella of a white-owned bank. They had the overarching infrastructure, but we were just going to create a black mortgage company so that black folk can get mortgages. And I'm so glad we didn't do it because I know what they were doing. They were just churning and burning these mortgages because Fannie Mae will buy the mortgage in 90 days. So these companies are selling Fannie Mae mortgages 100 a pop so that they can sell them to investors on Wall Street. And they're supposed to, if one mortgage goes bad, you replace it with another mortgage. Another mortgage goes bad, you replace. But there was like 40, 50 mortgages going bad at a pop, and they couldn't replace them bad enough. And that's why they were getting mortgages to your dome and to anybody with a pulse, because the market had already started to collapse on Wall Street, but they were holding it together with rubber bands and trying to make it stay together long enough for Obama to get elected. But Bush couldn't hold out. Don't you know if they could have waited 6 more months, we would have been blaming the entire collapse on Barack Obama? But most people don't realize that
Richard, I got one
Yes,
more
sir.
for you. I just saw online. I know we're going to wrap up, Reggie, and everything. But this
Well,
is
no, I
something
wanna-
online that is new as well and everything like that. But not only was it the highways, but some of them also went over some of our black communities, because apparently there was a city in Durham, North Carolina, or the Triangle area, I think it's down, maybe even going toward Fayetteville, called Friendship. It was one of those predominantly black towns that was literally flooded over. So some of these towns that we had were also flooded over, whether it was in Florida, whether it was in North Carolina, or others, but they were black townships that they also intentionally created man-made lakes over some of these villages after they obtained the rights to those lands, kind of like what they did with Shiloh and the airport and everything like that. So some of these lands were also converted to other uses, and that was like, I think, the Army Civil Engineers that did the lakes and everything like that. So they knew some of these properties were going to be going underwater.
Well, if you look at 54 going through Durham, which was a freeway, if you look at 295 or 395 and 695 going through the heart of DC, and you look at the elevation of those bridges and stuff, the whole idea was to try to keep us in control, black Americans in control. That means if there was an outbreak or a riot in the community, the National Guard could roll up on top of these bridges and look down into the black communities, okay? And one of the things that has happened here in DC is that 695, 395 area that was designed and with bridges and stuff that look down into Southwest DC, those areas have been gentrified, And now they got apartment buildings and a whole lot of other things down there for people. And so blacks that were living in that area, they have been pushed out of that area. Okay. Now, getting back to the mortgage debacle, and you said that that it's about 72,000 homes that or more that gonna have to be dropped in 7 years. Here in this area here, they building luxury townhome rental townhomes now. Okay. And they renting these suckers for about $3,000 a month. Okay, I agree with you, Richard. If you can pay $3,000 for a townhome, a 2-car garage townhome, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and everything, and you renting it, okay? So there is an investment company, a group of people that own these 2 townhomes in my neighborhood, townhome complexes, okay? Then if you can pay $3,000 for that townhome, renting it, and never having no ownership in it, then you should be able to afford a house. My thing is, I think the credit score is a manipulative score that's designed to keep individuals out. There's got to be something put in place along with the credit score to even the playing field, okay? And that's basically what needs to happen. If the playing field for these individuals was even, they wouldn't have to go out and pay $3,000 for a townhome to rent, and they wouldn't have to put down so much money. This is the thing. A lot of people don't save or can't save and have issues, okay? How do you prepare them to go into these homes with a low credit score, no down payment? There's got to be a mechanism put in place to even the playing field. And that's the only way that people who deserve, and you got to have a job now. I'm not saying you go into these new homes and you don't have a job or nothing like that, and the government going to take care of you. No, you still got to meet certain criteria, okay? But the beginning of getting into that home made it a little easier.
Have y'all heard of this movie?
Well, the key is margin call. Yeah, that's no margin. There's two great movies. Margin Call is one of them, and the other one is The Big Short. If you watch those 2 movies, you'll get a perfect understanding of how the game is played. In fact, there's The Big Short, that he just said it. It's The Big Short and Margin Call are the 2 movies. But if you wanna understand what a call is, do you guys remember the movie 48 Hours? I mean, not 48 Hours. What is it? Trading Places. Eddie Murphy and Trading Places, right?
Yeah.
Eddie and Dan Aykroyd, right? So at the end of the movie, when they got the what is it? The Duke brothers, right? They cheated them and caused them to lose all of their money. And at the very end, the guy who was the over Wall Street, he came up and he said, "We called our margin." And the Duke brothers went, "What the hell you mean? We don't have that kind of money." What a margin call means is if you've got a stock portfolio like Elon Musk doesn't have $1 trillion of money. He's got $1 trillion in stock in 3 different companies, right? He takes that money. What happens is Wall Street says, "We'll give you a loan of 50%. That's the margin. Some people might have a 60% margin. Some people's margin is only 30%. And Reggie, that's credit score right there. You see, that's how wealthy people have a credit score. Your credit score is how high your margin is. Well, the Duke brothers, because they've been at it for so long, probably had a higher margin than a smaller fund. So they could borrow money against their they had borrowed $300 million, and you're supposed to borrow your margin to buy more stock. That's really what you're doing. You're borrowing money from your stock to buy more stock. But they were buying assets and betting, hedging. So when they lost money, the $600 million that they had, they lost it all the way down maybe to $200 million. And when they had less money than they had margin loan, Wall Street called the margin. And when you call the margin, It says, we demand that you pay us back that loan on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a margin call is. So they demanded that they pay that money back. And the Duke brothers says, well, we ain't got it. Then they said, well, we're going to take all your stocks off of Wall Street. We're going to take your shares. We're going to take every asset that you got to get close enough to the margin. And that busted them. So yes, a margin call can wipe you out. What do you say? I think it's crazy to buy stock with borrowed money.
But it is.
That's the name of.
But
no, follow what it is though.
But going back to the houses, we have to figure out a way in the next 7 years how to get these individuals into those homes that are going to hit the market. You know, and they overbuilding there. Here in my area, here in the DMV area, these guys are overbuilding like crazy. Okay,
they're overbuilding in Durham, North Carolina too.
They're just building to be building now. Okay, so you know,
the reason why they're doing that.
We got to go back to the old way.
Let me tell you the reason they're doing that. Remember.
Go ahead.
Well, we're back there now. We finally, with this bill that they just passed, but that money that's building up all those houses is the same money that they use for bailout. They got cash bailouts in 2008 that they were supposed to use to build up the economy, but they didn't use that money to build up the economy. They used that money to buy back their stock, invest in more money, borrow against it, leverage it, and they ended up with so much cash because they're not using that money to invest in new factories. They're not using that money to get more employees. In fact, they're making their companies more efficient so that they can have more profits. The problem with that is you end up with money that has no purpose. And when you got a stack of money, then you start getting inflation. And that's where we are right now because we got too much money in the marketplace. So you got to do something to burn it all off, like start a stupid war. But that's not, you can't burn off all the wealth that we got hovering around in the system. So now you're going to have to redistribute it. Oh my God, that sounds like socialism.
Yeah.
But they're going to end up redistributing it in a way that it's not socialism.
Yeah. But if we don't do something now, in 10 years, 3 years after the 7-year period, we're going to have empty homes sitting all out through our community, grass growing up in front of them, windows broken out, and things of that nature, okay? You know, we've got to design, you know, come together and design a program that when the 7-year period is up, these people can go and buy these homes, okay, and be homeowners. Because I think everyone has to be a homeowner.
Let me give my thought on it. Number one is this. The federal government has got to get back into the business of building and buying houses because only the federal government can absorb a loss. Only the federal government can build a house that costs $210,000 and sell it for $190,000. The government can do that because it can run up a debt and a deficit. We got $38 trillion of debt right now, but we didn't get that debt by giving it to poor people. We ran up that. How the hell we got $38 trillion of debt? I don't know. But we didn't get it by giving out food stamps and making poor people wealthier. We got it by cutting taxes and still trying to run the government on less money. That's stupid. So what the federal government can do, the federal government can create a 7-year mortgage. That's what you do. That's how you get people out of debt. You create a 7-year mortgage. So that means like when you build a house, you got to pay for the land, you got to pay for the material, you got to pay for the labor. That's pretty much what it costs to build a house. Land, material, and labor. And then you have taxes. Now you can remove the taxes or pay the taxes on the back end. So now you just got land, material, and labor. Well, if the government absorbs the cost of the land, you just got material and labor. And if you sell a house for the cost of material and labor, I guarantee you that $400,000 house is not going to be $400,000, maybe $280,000. And then with a $280,000 loan over 7 years, you could pay that off quicker. But what we're doing is doing 30 years of mortgage because we're trying to make the banks rich. So we got to restructure the whole financial system. what does he say? But does the program mean loans are given to high-risk borrowers?
No.
Of course. Yeah, but listen, yes, the loans are given to high. Let me say this real quick. The loans are given to high-risk borrowers, but they are all collateralized. They're collateralized by the house themselves.
But this is what happened in 2000 through 2008. A lot of those people had good jobs, but they didn't have the money, the buying power to get into those homes. If you came in there, you were making $100,000. These guys are putting you in homes that were $500,000 and $600,000. Okay, which they should have never done. So if you're going to allow high-risk borrowers to come in there, you got to be a way to make sure that they can, when times get tough, they can still carry the weight. If not, those homes going to be empty. And so that's the whole thing that happened in 2000. These mortgage brokers got rich from 2000 to 2008.
Right, but that's not the. But see, and that's what we need to stop doing. That was not the fault of the high-risk borrower. That's the fault of the loan shark and the scamming. But none of those bankers went to jail. Not one of them. Not one went to jail. They just rolled over and got a brand. Not one. There wasn't one person that went to jail. They got $800 billion of bailout money to patch a hole, $800 billion hole that they blew in the economy, and not one of them went to jail. No. So there's no such thing as a high-risk borrower.
Yeah. Well,
no such thing. Not in this scenario.
Yeah, but I think, he might be looking at the fact that when you go into a house, you need to go into the house that you can afford. Yeah, that $600,000 house looks good, but if you can only afford a $300,000 house, go to the $300,000 house, work on getting some equity, and then move it to the $600,000 house. And that's what we got to do. But we're going to have to do something because, like I said, those homes are going to come open. So that's what I'm saying is, what's wrong with a group of people coming together and say, okay, 72,000 homes out there, let's buy 20,000.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. You've got black folk there are black people who can pull together a pool of money, because it's not about them having the money, it's about them being able to bring that money in. Those same investors who are buying up these houses right now are going to be the exact same investors who will give you and me $100 million to buy them. All they want is a return on their investment. They just didn't have to deal with no middleman come into they could just come into the black community and snatch them up. Now, 72,000 houses that were meant to go to white folk, if they had been buying up 72,000 houses in Idaho or Colorado or Maine, they would have stopped that long ago. But it was 72,000 houses in Atlanta. So they ain't got no problem with it being in Atlanta. So that's what we've got to do is to know, now that we're able to level the playing field, the game is going to change. Let me say another thing. I believe if I would tell everybody this, if you're not, I don't know if you guys have IKEAs. Do you have those IKEA stores? Here they're big furniture stores, but in every one of these IKEAs, they usually have two of them set up where they'll have a room or like a small apartment that's about 585, 87 to 600 square feet. I walked in that space. I'm like, who the heck could live in 587 square feet? Man, I walked up in there and it was nice. So if we build houses that have 3 of those units, you can put 3 families in one house now with a 3-car garage, and the house is still less than 3,000 square feet. That's what we got to do is change the way we build houses.
You don't need to do that. They're building tiny homes now. Yep. And they're building tiny homes that have some space in them that, hey, you walk in there and you in an 800 square foot house and you looking around and say, this is all I need? And they building them for $30,000, $40,000. They being built. We just ain't got on the bandwagon to go ahead and buy a big piece of land and set them down. I bet you if you got 20 acres of land and split it up and put tiny homes on them, I guarantee you'll sell those tiny homes with no problem.
I'm working with a client. Listen, I'm working with a client right now that he and his wife own 200 acres here in Florida, and we're looking to launch that exact project, building tiny homes around a tiny golf course. Tiny, so it's tiny luxury homes for retired folk like myself. Because I'm in like 2,400 square feet here, and I'm by myself, so I know I've got more house than I need. I'd gladly downsize to a town. Anybody out there want to trade a tiny house for a big old house? Call me.
Cause look, and then on this note we had to go. But if you take a tiny home that has a decent sized kitchen, one main bedroom, a loft bedroom, living room, bathroom with a shower and everything, and a spot for your washing machine and dryer. That's the whole deal right there. And you live in
That's
comfort.
it. We've been bamboozled in this nation.
Yeah, because we have
I was going to say we've been bamboozled to believe that more is more. We don't need bigger and more anymore. I don't think. Yeah.
I know we're wrapping up, but I think I mentioned this before on one of our other shows. But there's a gentleman, Montague is his name. He's a black developer, and I know that he just built the village of Hayti. I was actually at the groundbreaking when they did that 2 months ago. So it was May 13th. So he's actually going to be bringing 252 affordable housing units to the area and everything like that. And it's actually near the Shirley Caesar way. I think that's named after the Shirley Caesar, the great gospel singer and everything like that. And I think it's going to be a combination of affordable like apartments and also regular houses. So it's going to be like a mixed unit because he's working with a couple of developers in that area and everything like that. But they've got some major investments. And like I said, when I saw the groundbreaking, I haven't been down there recently, but I know when I went there 2 months ago, it looked like it's going to be a lovely project. And then it's just going to be a matter of getting people into those houses and it becoming a authentic community, because this is even part of what the center wants to do is develop some properties around us and everything like that. So yeah, it's going to be seeing some growth in some of the old black Wall Streets and everything like that. So like you said, it's a matter of getting people that have got that mindset and everything like that. Because I know that one of the properties right behind the Cultural Arts Center that used to be owned by an Atlanta family, and then the Mr. Road Fox passed away. His daughter, who runs a construction management company out of Atlanta, she sold it to some folks, and now it's like it's houses that are back there. It's probably like 20, 25 units and everything like that. And those units, once those people move out, will probably be developed as well. So there's some opportunities even here in North Carolina, and there's some people that are looking at some of the things that developers are doing, because developers also have to be very conscientious, because one of the developers got in trouble, which is why that property is sitting empty. It used to be, we were talking about Winn-Dixie. It's actually, I think it was one of the major grocery stores, and then it became like a Chinese grocery store. But right now it's just, and also a flea market, and I think there was a dollar store and a Subway, but it's sitting empty because the developers came in, I think they were from Chicago, and they didn't really try to get the buy-in from the community. If you're going to be coming into a community, you need to get buy-in from the community so that you can actually have it developed and correctly and everything like that. Because if you don't get the buy-in, the community will rebel against you, which is what happened in our particular area, which is why it's sitting empty now.
Right. Okay, guys, look, we've had a vibrant discussion tonight, which will be continued. But, to my listeners and viewers out there, we've got to figure out a way how to access the riches that this country offers and go claim our share of the money, okay? And that's what we got to do. We got to develop generational wealth for our kids, our grandkids. We've got to be the spearhead of it, okay? We know things are coming up, but are we prepared to take part in what's going to start happening in this country later on, after a change of administration? Are we prepared to be a part of that and to reap the benefits that go along with it? So I want to thank Mark and Richard for being a part of this conversation tonight. Look forward to seeing you guys next Tuesday night. Everyone be safe. Have a good weekend. Stay hydrated, because in this area, we're looking at 100 degrees.
We've just been looking at hot weather too, and it's definitely been hot around here. By the way, before we leave, let's also thank our listener, Liberty Twitcher. Hopefully he'll join us again next week. I know he was here, I think, last week as well. So hopefully he'll be a regular, and we'd love to see him bring some friends of his as well. And because we always love having engaging conversation, including those with our listeners, both those that are attached to the Urban Sentinel magazine, the physical magazine, as well as those that are watching here on Pod TV. So Liberty Twitcher, if you're listening and you want to join in the conversation again tomorrow, even if it's online, we'd love to hear your input, and we appreciate you being here listening on this particular time.
Okay, everyone. Have a good rest of the week. Take care and be safe. Good night.
Good night.
All right, guys. Take care. Peace.